wine's just always been around. It's always been the connector. It's been the community. It's been on the table.
I think no matter what profession you're in, wine or otherwise, like it's tough to work with your significant other.
Winemaking for me, all of it is fascinating. It's the most all-encompassing job on the face of the planet. You are at Mother Nature's mercy. Like, my job is to take what happened and to bottle it in the most beautiful way that is respectful of the place that we live in, of our environment, but also has a gentle impression of me, but not so much of an impression of me that I get in the way of all the other delicious things that happened. There's no shitty story that starts, I opened a bottle of wine with my friends, or I opened a bottle of wine with some strangers. You know, it's always like, this is like, it's the mesh, right? It's the ties that bind. It's wonderful.
Today we're talking to Kate Norris, owner and winemaker of Division Winemaking Company. Kate started Division in 2011 with her partner Tom. After growing up in Europe and beyond, where wine was always a major part of her life, Kate and her partner Tom made the choice to jump into winemaking in the recession in 2008. In 2011, they started Division right here in Southeast Portland. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey.
Such a pleasure. And we're going to have a discussion today on wine and what it means to be a woman in wine, and hear about your story, which is fascinating, and what brought you here, and drink some wine in the process. So I would love to start off by hearing about the wine that you selected to start us off today.
Yeah, it's the Roussel Vineyard from Elk Cove, and it's a wine that I selected because it's a wine that means community to me. And that is what wine is all about. It's about sharing. It's about paying it forward. It's about coming together. When I was just thinking about making wine in Oregon, and sort of the story starts with a different wine and then moves to this wine. Uh-huh. But I had the chance to go to a really lovely restaurant down in the Bay Area called Chez Panisse. Mm-hmm. And it was my business partner, Tom. We were celebrating a really lovely occasion, but we were also been saving up, and it was the Monday night dinner at Chez Panisse. And it was $50 per person, you know, and that's all we could afford.
At Chez Panisse?
Chez Panisse, I know, but this is 20 years ago. And we asked the somm what wine we should have with it. And he hilariously recommended a bottle of Oregon Pinot Noir. It wasn't this wine. It was actually Cuvée J from Ishenwood. And we loved the wine so much that we called up Russ Rainey to just talk to him about like wine and making wine in Oregon.
Who's the winemaker of Eversham Wood, right?
Yeah, it was. Rest in peace, actually. So Russ passed away a few years ago. And instead of just talking to us on the phone, he's like, why don't you just come up and stay at my house and let me show you around. Let me show you my community. And he, sight unseen, let Tom and I come up, stay with him and his wife and his son. And he just dragged us all over the Loire Valley, like literally everywhere. Just,
were you winemakers yet?
No, we were just thinking about getting into wine. We were about to go to school. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he pulled me up to Bethel Heights where I got to walk around with Pat Dudley. I ended up playing ping pong with Steve Dorner from Christum, you know, like, and I'm just like a kid, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. I can't believe this person who doesn't know me would share so much with me and want to show me so much of what is his community. Wow. Fast forward, I was sitting at a little restaurant called Nick's Italian Cafe a few years afterwards.
Here in McMinnville.
In McMinnville, yeah. And I was sitting actually with my mentors who I had brought over from France to sort of take a look at the Loire Valley with me, just to be like, hey, we're thinking about like making wine here. And we were having a delicious meal, and we ordered the first vintage of the Roussel Elk Cove Pinots in 1996. Wow. I had it on the menu. And I remember tasting the wine and being like, okay, I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. I'm moving to the Loire Valley. And Nick's Italian Cafe was a place where winemakers would come together and also share their community, which is so awesome. Fast forward a little bit to that. I've always loved the wines that Adam Campbell and his team make at Elk Cove. They're just absolutely beautiful. And the story of the Campbells is the story of pioneering they planted grapes in the Loire Valley when there was nothing. They believed in the fact that this could happen here. Mm-hmm. And when I think about my journey and about any brave motions I've made to make wine, I always think back to the Campbell's family and how incredibly brave they were to just put stuff in the ground and just hope for it, and then to create a community around them. Anyway, I had Adam at the winery when we had the Southeast Wine Collective, just across the river. Mm-hmm. And we're doing an event, and I've always been a huge fan, and I was like fangirling really hard and probably had like one too many sips of wine, and told him this story about how his bottle of wine was the second wine that moved me to the Loire Valley.
And did you pick the bottle at that dinner?
I think we all picked it together. Yeah. Like we were just super curious. I think it was the oldest vintage on the menu. It was like, we knew that the winery was really good, and we're like, let's see what this is. So I was telling Adam this story, and he was like very sweet. Like I think he was probably a little taken aback, but he was really sweet about it. And the next time I saw him, he brought me a magnum of that bottle to share. And literally was like, this is, I'll never forget that story and the story you told me about why you're here.
Wow.
So this bottle for me, as I'm going to sip it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And cheers to Adam.
Cheers to Adam. Cheers to paying it forward and sharing. Cheers to cross-generational, these beautiful Venn diagrams.
Okay, so there's so many things in there that I would love to touch on. And so you were talking about the early kind of pioneering generations of Oregon and people like the Campbells who had the courage to just show up in a new place. And I see a lot of parallels in what you've done, honestly. So backing up a little bit or a lot, you, correct me if I'm wrong, you've lived in a lot of different places. Mm. Your dad is English. Yeah. Your mother is Malagasy. Madagascar.
She's Madagascar, and so French by nationality. So I'm half.
And so you've lived in England, France, Bahrain, mm-hmm. Switzerland, multiple places in the U.S. Yeah. Did I miss anything?
No, multiple places in the U.S. So I laugh. I've lived in Florida. I've lived in upstate New York. I've lived in the Midwest. I've lived in San Francisco. So when people were like, is Oregon home? I'm like, I've tried them all. Like, this is as good as it gets. So
out of all the places that you've lived in, countries, states, all of them, is there a particular one that you identify with? Like when people say, where are you from? Like what comes to mind?
I identify with all of them. I think that they're each one is a part of my makeup. And I was actually hilariously, I was talking to a friend of mine this past weekend who also has this history of living in different places. And so every time someone brings a place up, they're like, I'm from there. I'm from like this. So multiple places. And I feel the same way. I feel like I'm from a lot of different places.
Could you give us examples of like, what are some really formative pieces that you feel like you got from different cultures that have made who you are?
I think, my mom being Malagasy, and being French by nationality, French by colonization is a huge part of my identity. Growing up with a Black mother in very white countries, actually. So in Switzerland, in France, and in England, and being a part of her navigating that and also wanting to protect me, who was white passing. It was a really interesting dynamic, but also being given the opportunity to flourish in a very white culture too. It's like, I'm like very thankful for that. I'm thankful for like my dad's British background, which really enjoys wine. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like there was always wine on the table, and that's just sort of culturally part of being a part of his family. Like there's always.
Is that where you were first introduced to wine? Was in England?
I was in England and then also in France. Growing up in this tiny wine producing village, as much as possible, my mom would take us out of England, and then she'd drive us down to this tiny cottage in the Auvergne and the Loire Valley, and because she didn't love being in England, and it was really tough on her. And so literally every opportunity she'd get, she'd stick us in the car and drive 8 hours.
Did she have family in France, or was it just because the language?
So combination. So her sister also had lived in that village and had married a gentleman from that region. So it was to be close to family. And then also just France, of all the places that she's lived, was, I guess, the most like home for her.
The next question I was going to ask was to be about what it felt like to be a woman in all those various cultures. And do any stand out as places that it felt better or worse or unique in some ways to be a woman?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think that I was really fortunate to be raised in a family where I was told I could do it. I could do anything. And that luckily for me, sex is not part of a barrier at all. And that in itself is a giant privilege. I feel that the place where it's been the hardest has actually been in the US. And I think that the place that it has been the hardest for me was originally when I was a part of the wine industry. I would pour wine at events and the people standing in front of me would look to any male character that was standing next to me, whether it just be someone that was helping busing or, or just someone that came over to say hello, as to more details or expertise on the wine. And I remember at first just really wondering about how to combat that. Do you brush it off? Do you engage and note their incorrectness? Does that affect your ability to sell your wine to that person? As a woman, it's a really strange aspect. Like if you stand up for yourself, are you offending someone so they're no longer going to be a customer?
Has what your reaction or technique, has that changed over time?
Yeah, I've definitely started to stand up for myself more. At first, you're just like, oh my goodness, I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then you go to like, it's almost the stages of grief. Like you go to like anger at a point and you have to like restrain yourself from being a complete bitch about it, and then you just have to look them in the eye and tell them that they're wrong.
I mean, from an outsider looking in, like I look at your life and the choices that you've made seem to me like you have this utter lack of fear when it comes to just jumping into something new or unknown or going against the grain. Like most people have moved, from like Portland to Chicago, and you've not only moved within cities and states in the US, but also all over the world. And then you've had the experience of jumping from one career to another, I think multiple times, which we'll get to. And then coming up to Oregon, again, when you had very few connections in a new industry, and then choosing to build a winery in the city as opposed to out in the valley. Like all of those are sort of not the normal, not the worn path. Have you always felt like okay with making that difficult choice?
I think it's because I moved around so much with my parents. And I think that the thought was that like, if the shoe doesn't fit, you can try another one, but also the fact that we're on a journey and this is one life to live, right? If we're going to quote like a terrible, sorry, so I'm working that. But, like, I don't know when this is going to end. This journey is going to end for me. And I really believe that every single day it's just an opportunity to try again. The sun came up. I am incredibly fortunate to even be alive. Like if you just think about reproduction, like if your parents had sex a second later, like you wouldn't be you. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it could be completely different. Like, and so every day I'm just like, like I'm just going to try and it matters a lot, but it also in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter that much.
Okay. So that's so interesting because I was going to ask you if you identified with being like an overachiever or a perfectionist in some way, only because maybe, you put yourself on other people. Like I have identified as that. I'm like a recovering perfectionist and I try to do a lot. And I look at you as someone who does a lot, like performs at a very high level. And I was going to ask you like how you've balanced kind of having a healthy attitude around that. But what you just said is so refreshing to hear. Like it doesn't sound like you doing a lot is coming from a place of like needing approval or needing to impress people. It's more like, this is the day I have. This is what I've been given. How lucky am I?
At the end of the day, I think that I laugh. My husband, he's A+ and I'm A++. Does that make sense? It's like, he looks at me, he's like, you're just like, you just do it all. And he's like, it's just who you are. And at first I wondered if it was about approval, but I really feel like at the end of the day, I want to lie down and put my head on my pillow knowing I did everything I could do to fulfill like my happiness, right? And to feel like, and also part of my battle is if I don't fulfill those things, forgiving myself.
Yeah.
And being okay with not living up to what I thought I would be up to that day, and realizing like, who did you let down? Who did you actually hurt in this? Like, does it matter? Is it like, are these life or death situations? And so that constant striving for balance is who I've become.
Have you found ways as the years have gone by to give yourself more grace or rituals that kind of renew your energy and bring you back to life?
I think actually the pandemic was what really reset it. Waking up every morning and realizing that I couldn't, no matter what I did, I couldn't change the outcome, and pivoting and trying to do so much and staying up and trying to read the cycles and the signs and realizing at the end of the day, like, oh shit, this has nothing to do with me. And then taking a deep breath and being like, why would you have thought it had something to do with you?
It's almost an ego thing. You're like, oh, did I think I was that powerful?
Or just like, what did you think you were like? What are you trying to fix here? That's so out of your purview. Right?
Yeah.
And then just being like, it's going to be okay. It's going to what's going to happen is going to happen. Try your hardest. But also don't kill yourself while doing it.
Well, and speaking of pivoting, so going back again, you've had, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 different past careers as an interior designer and an event planner.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yes, I worked for an interior design group when I was in New York City, right out of college. And
is that what you went to college for?
No, not one bit. I have 3 majors, but nothing to do with those.
What were the 3 majors?
I'm a developmental geography, political science, and art history triple major.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I love that. Who knew? The art history one's funny. It actually, like 3 days before graduation, they announced that I had enough credits to be an art history major also. And I was like, seriously? No one's been tracking this? They're like, no, you're officially an art history major too. And I was like, wow. You're taking an exam? I'm like, no, you don't need to take an exam. I'm like, okay, cool. But so liberal arts education, like sort of about learning how to balance your life, learning how to be an adult, learning how to go to class, learning how to not to go to class, learning how to do your laundry, learning how to, talk your way into or out of things.
Yeah.
So that was college for me.
And what pulled you into interior design?
So it was actually really funny that I went to a really small school, and I'm not going to lie, when you go to a small liberal arts college like that, you go there for the experience, but you also go there because of the alumni network.
Yeah.
And I've always, the art part of my life, I love, right? And just, I think that everything is aesthetic. Like we eat with our eyes, we drink with our eyes. Like we have these eyes to be able to see the world and to like bring things in. And art, music, wine, they're all interconnected for me. They're one and the same. And so I had basically an alumni be like, hey, do you want to come and work for me for a little bit? And I was like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Yeah. I thought about public relations for a little bit. But I also knew that I was ultimately lost. Like I didn't have a career path. And I'm thankful that I had that, just over a year to work for this interior design firm. And they were also importing antiques from France. So there was a lovely connection there. And I got to work in New York City, and decide. Well, I actually had already decided that I was going to move to the West Coast. My parents had said that I was going to live that I had been telling them since I was 5 that I'd live in California. They're like, does she even know where this is? I
manifested that. Yeah.
Manifested it, got my car and drove. So,
wow.
So that the interior design work and working for that firm just sort of gave me this launching pad, but it also sort of allowed me to develop a little bit more of that aesthetic. I landed on my one of my friends from college, his mom's back door. Like literally, I moved to the Bay Area, moved in with him, and didn't have a job. And so I actually started working as his mom's personal assistant for a little bit. And then they let me start like running events and being like a captain for events. And then I was allowed to start planning events. And so I built.
What did you like about? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's the best. It's something new every single day, but something that's based in planning, but also with the need to operate on the fly. So you come at it with this plan, but the plan is never executed exactly as written. And part of it is this beautiful, play of adapting, of reapplying knowledge from the past, or being able to improvise, all while making sure that the client has no idea. It's like a restaurant.
Client aside, I was going to say it sounds like winemaking.
It does, yeah.
Because my next question was going to be like, what was that transition? Well, how did you decide? How did you go from events and this more aesthetic side of things, where you're like in a pretty room with pretty people into a winery?
Yeah. Well, you're 100% right about it being a lot like wine, a lot like harvest, where you come up with a plan and you see what comes in, and then you're having to completely adjust. And what if you don't have enough vessels for this? And what if overnight you have the bricks drop more than you think, or maybe you're developing a little VA, like you have to, and we laugh with all of the people that work on our team, our harvest assistants. I was like, I write a plan out in the morning. I was like, but flexibility is necessary. Like everybody has to be ready for the plan to change a few times throughout the day, and to just roll with it and to realize we're not insane. like the grapes are telling us how to change things. When it comes to how I decided to go from events to wine. So Tom and I used to be married once upon a time. And we got married out in California, and we're deciding on the next steps of our lives. And he wanted to go to business school and applied to a couple places, to Cal and Berkeley, and then also to Washington University in St. Louis. And he's from St. Louis originally. And his grandmother, who raised him for the most part, was dying of ovarian cancer. And so we decided that we would move to St. Louis, close to her. And she passed away right before we actually got there. So I moved sight unseen to St. Louis.
Once again.
Well, I've been like once or twice for to visit his family. But rented a house I'd never seen before, literally like turned up with a bag and was like, this is your life. And we lived there for 18 months. And during those 18 months, the economy in the U.S. completely changed. 2007, 2008, exactly. The economy crashed. And the world that Tom was in at the time he was in banking was in disarray. And the world that I was in, which was event planning, was also
in disarray.
It's going to be in disarray fast. Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like if people first of all, people didn't have enough money to have parties.
Yeah.
And if they had enough money to have parties, it was completely uncouth to have a party.
Yeah.
So I literally looked around and was like, we're screwed. And we're kids too. We're young. We're first on the chopping block for everything. While Tom was at business school, his final project was to write a business plan. And I helped to write a business plan on starting a winery.
Why? Why wine?
We both love wines. And it's I've been around me my whole life. His family really loves wine. It's one of those things. It's like when we lived in San Francisco, a lot of people our age would go out to eat and drink and stuff, but we would cook with our friends at home so we could spend more money on wine.
The wise choice.
Yeah, exactly. So it was so we could have nicer bottles. We'd be let's not go and spend $1 gazillion on a meal out right now because this is our budget.
Yeah.
And wine's just always been around. It's always been the connector. It's been the community. It's been on the table since I was little. Being European, your access to wine as a child is much greater. But also that it's not put in the alcohol category.
Yeah.
It's part of meal sharing and a little bit of water and wine when you're a little kid, or having a cup of champagne when you're celebrating anything. I remember my cousins graduating from high school and going back to go and see them, and they're 10, 15 years younger than me. and everyone's cheersing with champagne. And I'm like, these kids are like 14. Like I was like, oh, it's so different in the US. So we wrote this business plan. And then we looked around at our circumstances and we're like, oh my goodness, like the next few years of our life are going to be really turbulent. It's going to be hard to figure out like what our path is here. And we still had this tiny cottage in the Auvergne. We had friends in the wine business. And we had the opportunity to go and to study, and to work for other winemakers. And the thought process was, if we hated it and we were really bad at it, that nobody would say like, you wasted 2 years in France learning how to make wine. I'll be like, no, we actually like, this is what we did. And if we loved it, well, here we are.
So I've heard you say now a couple times that wine is, first you tied it with like art and music. Mm-hmm. And then you said wine is like connection. Mm-hmm. And I guess before the connection piece, kind of thinking about tying it in with art and music. And I've heard you describe wine before, in terms of emotions or feelings. And you have a very creative way. Like it's clear that creativity is a through line in your life. And I'm wondering, that must just be how your brain works? Do you think that also, could you speak to kind of like how your brain interprets wines and how you describe them in terms of art and emotion and all of that? Yeah. And maybe how that plays into your winemaking as well?
I describe them less in terms of the classic flavors and more in terms of energy, which is really, I guess so. It's like, I'm always like, it's electricity, or it's a color, or
it's joyful,
or it's, it's the weight of water rushing in a small stream. It's like, flavors are, for me, subjective. If we think about our tongues and what we know about them is that they are as unique as our thumbprints, and that everybody tastes differently. So what I think is a blueberry, I mean, I guess it's a blueberry to you, but who knows, right? I think the energy is constant. Like, I think as humans, we all understand energy. I think it's like a physics thing, right? Like, we all understand how the velocity, we all understand light. We might not see the same color, but I think we can all understand how energy is. And I think that for me, wines, there's like different energies for different people, right? And different textures for different people. And that's the beauty for wine, is that there's something for everybody. There's like so many different energies and times like caught up and capsuled in these bottles. And then also that they can relate to different humans differently. But if you opened them on a different day, that they could relate to another human being a different way also. So it's fascinating to me.
Do you think intuition plays into that at all? Like, I feel like women are sort of purported to have a better sense of like gut instinct or intuition, or, I mean, even just in terms of what you're describing, I hear women describe wine more often in terms of energy or feeling than I do men.
For sure.
And I don't think one is better or worse, but it's something I've noticed.
I think that, and this is actually, it's funny, it comes back to blending, which we did a couple of weeks ago. The intuition for me is enjoyment. Does this give you exactly what you want? When we're making our blends, whether it's our big Pinot Noir, it's not that many, it's 1,000 cases, it's less. It's, would you drink this whole bottle by yourself? And I'm like, and that's the energy I'm going for. That's the, like, this is so good that I would. And it's not like a hoarding thing or like an addiction thing. It's like, this is so good that I would drink this whole bottle by myself. And when we're doing these blends and when we're thinking about our wines, if I don't feel that way, I'm like, this isn't the wine. This isn't right. Like, maybe we need to leave a barrel out. Maybe we need to bring another barrel in. Maybe we need to try again.
Do you and Tom make wine differently? And how do you like complement each other in the whole process?
We're actually, so I think that we both, it's actually one of the easier parts of our relationship is our winemaking. I think it's like we have very, very similar mindsets. But we also have come to this point where if one of us is saying hard pass on something, that they get to have the veto, and if someone is if one of us is just so like, no, I don't think this is right, then it's like, okay, well then we got to find out what's right then.
Yeah.
Because when it is right, it's so easy, right? It's like, it's obvious that it's right. And so in the 15 years we've been making wine together, 15 vintages by ourselves, that it's like when it's right, it's right. You just know it's supposed to, and that's life. It's supposed to be work, but it's not supposed to be hard.
Well, I'm fascinated by how you two, I'm fascinated that you can still work together. So like respectful, like I think you must be doing something very right to have a healthy, what seems like a healthy, respectful relationship with your ex-romantic partner, but he's still your current business partner. And I tried it. I couldn't do it. Like I opened 2 businesses with my ex and I am still good friends with him, but that's because we're not business partners anymore. And I think no matter what profession you're in, wine or otherwise, like it's tough to work with your significant other.
It really is, and Tom is family at the end of the day. And I'm not going to pretend that it isn't tough. We butt heads all the time, but he is family. And I know we have each other's best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. And I know like in difficult moments, I know he calls me, and whether it's work or personal difficult moments, he calls me and I call him. And I think at the end of the day, we just know each other so very well. He is a sibling to me.
Yeah.
He is, I feel like one of my mom's other kids. Like I think she considers him that way still. His son calls me Uncle Kate. He's hilarious, right? Like, but it's not easy, but it's a decision that we made. And I think if we weren't able to have done it, that we wouldn't be where we are. And there's no like shame in it failing or it succeeding. It was the part of our relationship that we were best at. We were better at being business partners than we were at being friends or together, And so when we decided to split up, that it was one of those things that's like, do we throw it all out? Like, what do we keep? And what we should do? Should we try and keep? And we're good at making wine together, and we are. And, I loved opening a bottle with him and being like, this is so good. Like we're good at what we do.
What are your favorite parts of the winemaking process? Like, especially since you have a partner, are there certain things that you gravitate towards and you love doing and he's better at? And
yeah. So when it comes to winemaking, we're 50-50, 100%. It's the other parts of the business that are sort of split up. And I think that's just based on time. Mm-hmm. Winemaking for me, all of it is fascinating. It's the most all-encompassing job on the face of the planet. You are at Mother Nature's mercy. Like my job is to take what happened and to bottle it in the most beautiful way that is respectful of the place that we live in, of our environment, but also has a gentle impression of me, but not so much of an impression of me that I get in the way of all the other delicious things that happened. And then I also get to do that with Tom. So it has to be an impression of us also. So a combination of both people. And then you do that. You have to work with Mother Nature. You have to work with these incredible plants. We get to farm one of our vineyards with Jessica Cortell. We also have some great other vineyard managers. So working with them throughout the year. Then we get to the blending process and really getting to that spot where you're like, this is delicious. This is indicative of everything I want to say. If it was, I would say, and a lot of people say this, there's no bad years. It's just hard years, right? So how do I make a hard year taste good? How do I make an easy year taste interesting? All of those combinations of things like that, it not just be banal and here it goes. And then you put it into a bottle and then you have to put a label on that bottle that is appealing to other people while still representing you and what is in the bottle. Okay, let's start there. So it's taste, so it's fashion at the same time and art, but you want to be timeless. You can't just be trendy, because if you're trendy, then you're disrespecting the process of wine and the history and how long people have been doing this for and how long it takes to actually bring something to fruition. So it can't just be flash in the pan, because that's not authentic either. And then you have to think about the millions of people that are your potential customers, and how can you be something for each one of them? And how can this one bottle of wine, I say, how can it appeal to your like uncle that might be a little bit more conservative, to your grandmother who's like has her mindset on like what she likes, to the younger cousin who's like getting into it, like, and how can you put a bottle on the table that is able to satisfy all of those people?
What is your litmus test? Is that again like trusting your gut? You're like,
it really is. Yeah. If it feels good, right? And if it is authentically itself. I always say, like, what's the story? What's the reason? What is our purpose? Tom and I don't make wines just for the sake of making wines, and we don't put on labels for the sake of making labels. Like, we sit there and we experiment and we talk about things for years before they even come to market. And I would say, like, the number one for me is my orange wine. Like, I, for a long time, was really confused about orange wine. So we started experimenting, making our own in 2012. Like, literally, I was just like,
ahead of the curve.
I was just like, let's just start trying this. I was like, I don't understand it. Like, I enjoy some orange wines, but some of them I don't want to drink entire bottles of, like what it's like. And some of them, these are the most incredible wines I've ever tried, but some of them are really, really not that great. And so we started experimenting to the point where we were finally ready about 5 years ago, to be like,
everyone else should have taken that much time.
It was just like, I was like, well, I guess we'll just like, now we're ready and we'll do this. And we found a beautiful label from a local artist here in Portland, Camille Shoe. And it's actually classically, like, it's not like the most orange of orange wines. It's not the most complicated of them, but it's a bottle that I enjoy. Like, I really like drinking it. And at the end of the day, it's like, I have to be like, I stand behind this. But then this was my process. I didn't start making it for the sake of making it. I started making it because Tom and I were like, what is this? Like, can we make one? Like, can we make one we like? And the first ones we made, no, thank you. So
it sounds to me like you're always following your curiosity and your interest, which I think is so important. And that probably keeps you from getting bored
I think
or stagnating.
And I think that like, with respect for how everybody's processes are, there's a lot of people in this world where farming one plot of land and farming it perfectly and making that and just absolutely doing that single expression over the course of their lifetime, that is their inspiration. Tom and I are a little more ADD. Not gonna lie. Like, I love diversity. I love bringing smiles to everybody's face in the room. I love when someone doesn't like one of my wines, working with them to find one that they do like, and allowing them. I think that part of that process is that a lot of wine has been off-putting to people because they think they're making mistakes, or like, if I don't like this, am I wrong? Or if I don't say this the right way, like, will I be chastised for it? And I think to have the person who makes it say, it's okay if you don't like this one, let's just try again. I hope that just gives them some just a relaxation and some leeway to explore and to feel confident and to know that nobody has the right answers.
So I want to talk, I'm going to pour this wine. This is the second wine as a segue into just
cheers out code.
I know, if I didn't have to go strewing back to work after.
For breakfast. That's my favorite. I had like a pork bow for breakfast too. So I'm like full on the like not breakfast mode.
You're doing the day right.
Oh, I love blind. What are we going to do here? Oh my goodness.
Okay. So I wanted to use this as a segue to talk about community, which you've touched on a couple times, and the importance of community to you. And yeah, tell me what you think about this wine. Maybe you'll recognize it. Maybe you won't.
It smells like Gamay to me.
I loves it. Your brain went there because I want to talk about Gamay. It does smell like Gamay.
To be honest, brightness to it. I don't think it actually is in the mouth. It doesn't have enough structure. But
it did have that very fresh
floral nose. Yeah. And a little bit of that sanguine note, which I really love. But in mouth, it has texture of Pinot. So
yeah, So it is Pinot. And this is granted a much different vintage than the one you had, but you actually already mentioned this wine.
Oh my goodness.
This is the Cuvée J. I love this from Evesham Wood. I heard you mention it, and I actually texted Tom.
They're both here.
Yeah. And you already sort of told the story of tasting this wine and Russ inviting you, but I would love for you to just speak to like that community that you were welcomed with here. And I've heard you talk about why you chose to put Division in the city, and it seems like it's really related to community. And I just wondered if you could talk about that.
The wine's about sharing. Totally cool to drink alone if you want to, right? But there's no shitty story that starts, I opened a bottle of wine with my friends, or I opened a bottle of wine with some strangers. It's always like, this is like, it's the mesh, right? It's the ties that bind. It's wonderful. Oregon is built on community. It's very different from any other region I've ever made wine in my life or experienced. And even, having made wine in France and lived in France, the government is very involved in wine, and there's a lot of rules when it comes to where something's planted and how much it's worth, and like it can be across the street from vineyards from each other, and that's worth 10 times more what this is worth, and power to them, But I sometimes feel that all of those things sort of push people apart instead of bringing people together. And I feel that sometimes it creates these ideas of, I love collectability, but I also don't believe in not just opening that bottle when the time is right, and any time is right. So the time is right when you feel like doing it, not because you feel like you should.
It's like the act of opening the bottle creates the memory, creates the story.
It creates the story. And then, and wine is stories in bottles. So it's the story of who grew it in the year. It's the story of who blended it and made it. It's the story of the person whose art is on the label. It's the story of how you chose to buy that bottle. It's the story of the day you chose to open it, and stories that are told when you're drinking it. And then it's the stories that you retell of that moment because you talk about them again, right? And whether you talk about that wine while you're retelling those stories or not is insignificant. It's that it creates these opportunities for storytelling. And storytelling is community for me. And Oregon has it in spades. It's still a relatively small wine growing region. I still have access to the first people that put grapes in the ground, those vines, and as it grows, as a community, I feel this huge need to keep harping on community. Like, I think that it's one of those things that can easily go out the door. And I think that it's one of the things that's most important about Oregon.
Well, you've created something so beautiful at Division, which I know other wineries do events, but I think just by the fact that you are located in the city, and maybe now I know you have this background in events, you intentionally create a hub for people to come together.
Yeah,
exactly.
Have a good time. Like, smile, laugh, enjoy.
And wine's a part of it, but often it's like, oh, we're doing the Bacchanal party, or we're doing a cookout, or there's music. Like, you give people a reason to come, and wine is sort of what ties them together.
It's sort of the thread, and it's not the most important part of the thread, but it's part of the thread. I was exposed to this beautiful community of wine people when we first thought about moving here. And then I moved to Portland, and really lucky to move here in 2010 and to have seen those 9 years, 2010 through 2019, were incredible in this town. It really were like this, and everybody was rooting for us. They were rooting for Portland, and wine was doing great. All of it was doing great. And then we had the pandemic hit. I was telling someone yesterday, I can't believe a third of my wine career has been in crisis, 2020 and now through 2024, basically. So,
well, and you you kind of started in crisis also.
At the beginning. But that's also understanding that you get through these things, through these waves, through community, and through coming together, and through believing in each other. When Tom and I moved our winery from the Southwest Wine Collective, literally the community of that little winery where we had a little wine bar and restaurant and 12 other winemakers making wine in the space, sort of creating a space for other winemakers to start their small brands and to see if this is what they wanted to dip their toes in. So we purchased this building with a few other people. That's the new space. It's called the Wine Yard. And I remember coming out of the pandemic and looking around and being like, what, like no one's having any fun. Like there's no smiles and everybody's still reticent to go out and to spend time together. And I'll be honest, like I didn't think that I would have to redo that. I didn't think that I'd have to like build it up from the bottom, from scratch again, like, and to create that sense of community once more. Tom and I finally looked at each other and we're like, crap, we're going to do it ourselves. So let's start over. And there's a lot of other people that are doing that too. But we all needed to sort of stand up and say, hey, I'm trying again, in order to see each other and to be like, oh, look, you're doing the good work too. Oh, good job. You're doing the good work over there, for us to build that community together again.
I think people are so hesitant since the pandemic to do anything. Like we're all happy the world's reopened, but I see people in so much more isolation. Mm-hmm. Like not because they have to be, but because of social anxiety or social media or whatever it is. And I think
my dad said this, he said this pandemic, it's like, it's going to change behavior overall. And we're not going to realize how much it's going to have changed behavior for a little bit. And I always love talking to my dad about stuff like that. He's super smart. And he's like, it's just going to change how people operate. And you see that. You see, like, I go to New York City. New York City closes at 10 p.m.
I know.
10 p.m.
It's crazy.
And this is a city that never sleeps. This is a city, like, it has my heart. I have a 917 number. Like, I love New York City. And I've gone a lot since 2021. And every time at 10 p.m., I'm like, can we be serious? Like, where is everybody? Yep. So we're needing to find what these new communities want. And like, and it's taking a lot. It's taking a lot of throwing spaghetti at the wall and being like, is this what y'all want? Like, is this going to make you smile and come out again?
Well, and wine, like you said, it's kind of like the other alcohol. Like, there's
beers for football, which I love,
Yeah.
Like,
like beer, you can sip a little more responsibly, but like the older you get, or you get in your 30s, or, people have kids and they're like, maybe I can't be like taking shots or drinking vodka sodas, but like I can share wine with friends. Mm-hmm. And it's more of a lifestyle thing, especially if you approach it with the European sensibility of moderation.
Moderation, yeah.
But it is this social glue.
I feel that it's hit, and alcohol is in this difficult spot right now.
It's under attack.
It's under attack, and it's under attack in a moment of weakness. And I think the moment of weakness, I think it's directly related to the pandemic. I think that a lot of people maybe overindulged during the pandemic, and they don't love the way that they feel after overindulging. I know a lot of my friends sat at home and drank a lot of alcohol, and I worked through the whole thing, so I don't really know. I'm like, really? That's what you guys did?
Still drink a lot of alcohol.
But I feel like a lot of people that maybe weren't used to that sort of stepped their toes into a world that maybe was a little dark and scary for them. And so not only are they backtracking off of that, but the anti-alcohol movement is seeing this sort of crack.
Yeah.
And is like, let's get in there and stop this. Moderation is key. There's plenty of other things that people do in their lives that are way worse for them than drinking a glass of wine.
Well, and I think anyone that would attend any of your events at Division, is going to walk away feeling their heart full, feel socially connected, have tried some great wine, and be better for it.
And it's do what you want. It's choose your own adventure, Come, and we always have any options, and it's like, come and share a bottle or just have a glass. Stay as long as you want. Linger or not. Like, there's no commitment. You're not like stuck, have it be whatever you need it to be in your lives.
And this is shifting gears, but I wanted to make sure I asked you about Gamay before we wrapped up, because I've always interpreted Gamay, maybe I'm wrong, but as almost like a self-portrait.
It is, yeah.
Could you talk about that brand?
It's a self-portrait with my mom.
Really?
So it's so my dad is definitely the wine person that's like, Yeah, he's the person that was like in the late 1980s when we were living in Switzerland, like they're making Pinot Noir in Oregon. And like, I remember sitting down and trying Domaine Drouhin, I was 8 years old at the time, and being like, okay, like, I don't even know where Oregon is, and so my dad's been the one that's like the major jar, but my mom has pretty distinct tastes in wine. She loves bubbles. She really loves Northern Rhone Syrah. And she's also she's my mom. And so we've had a relationship that's shifted over time, and it's gone from being my mother. She's my friend now, and it's really interesting to have our relationship has changed more than any other relationship in my life.
What does the word mean?
It means a mischievous young girl. It means like a total troublemaker.
And are you referring to yourself and to her when you say that?
She was totally one too. Yes, for sure. It's what she called me when I was little, like up to no good, and it's gone from me being up to no good to her being so proud of what I do and being such a sounding board for me. And so Gamay is the story of a young girl growing up, and it's also the story of being entrusted with something of your own, in a world where sometimes I feel that, especially when I was younger, that I didn't know if I had it in me to do it. Like, I had Tom as a business partner, and I have such convictions, but I didn't know that it was right for me to be like, oh, I'm going to make some wine by myself.
Did your mom ever play a role in that, like in encouraging you or giving you that?
So not directly. Tom actually was the one that encouraged me and surprised me with grapes and was like, you've been wanting to do this. You should just do this. Go for it. But I think also my mom just being, I'm grown up from total troublemaker to who I am now. I'm not a troublemaker anymore. I'm still a troublemaker.
Responsible troublemaker.
Exactly. Just don't get caught. It's a story of just me trying out things that I love and also understanding that not everything fits within the path that you take with others. It's okay to go out by yourself sometimes and to try new things. So there's Alain Gauthier, there's a little pet nat from Grenache. There's mostly carbonic Grenache. There's 2 Syrahs this year they're just expressions of me. And Tom always asks that I'm like super relaxed about those wines. Like all the other wines are kind of on a schedule for release. And I'm like, yeah, like whatever, like let's taste them. I'm not sure. And like it doesn't bother me if they don't sell out right within the cycle that we've like planned for, spreadsheets and stuff. I'm like, it'll be fine. Like I'm very relaxed with those wines.
Do you think it has to do with because they're for yourself and not for other people?
Yeah. I think so. I think they're for me and they need to taste perfect. We were laughing, like I had my pet nat. I still had a little residual. And so I like stuck it back away for 6 months. And Tom's like 6 months. I was like, I kind of looked at the calendar and like, we didn't really have time to just gorge it. And so this seems like a good time now. And he's like 6 more months. I'm like, tastes better, why not? And also allowing it to not, because what we do is our craft, right? But it's also my business. And allowing to have a little less on the pedal with that part of it and to have it feels, it's for the joy. It doesn't stress. Gamay never stresses me out. Let's put it that way. Ever.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's like your self-care wine.
It is. Exactly. It's exactly what it is.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I have one last question for you. What do you think your biggest superpower is in life or in wine? And maybe is it correlated to being a woman or not?
I can read the room, and it's the superpower that I ask to pass on to all of my friends' children. Like intelligence, emotional intelligence is something that I think is so incredibly important. Knowing what other people are feeling without them saying it, and being able to adapt yourself in order to make them comfortable, or to adapt yourself to say the thing that you need to say without making the situation worse. I would say reading the room is important. And that room can be small and that room can be big. It could be the world or it could be You know,
And
hearing
you say that, I don't think you mean like you always need to adapt yourself to make other people happy, but you need to be able to have that tool.
The tool in order to, and it's to make yourself happy too. Yeah. It's like, if you're going to read the room and say something hard, read the room so that hard thing doesn't make that hard thing worse, you know, and it's not about happiness. It's about just making sure things progress in a way that is work, but not hard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great skill to have.
Thank you. I work on it all the time, but I like that one. So,
well, I'm so grateful to you for lending us your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Week that harvest starts. Thank you so much. If people want to follow along with you and all the fun events you put on, where can they follow you on social?
Yeah,
where should they find you?
The easiest place. So at Division Wine Co. on Instagram. I'm at True Gamay, but I hardly post. It's one of those things when you post for work a lot, you end up not posting for yourself that much. But you literally get 3 posts a year from me max. And yeah, the winery's right here in town, so it's really easy. It's I always wanted to sort of be this beautiful gateway for wine loving and for people's wine trips. And so if you don't have a whole day to drive out to the valley, which I hope people do, I want them to do that. If you just want to come and like check out Harvest for a moment, you start on Friday. We'll be there
right from Southeast Portland.
Right in Southeast Portland. You can drive by, you can see us, you can like literally look to see if grapes are arriving. So,
well, thank you so much for being here.
Cheers.
I know. Cheers.
Cheers. I love that. The 2 wines. My heart sings. I love that. Yeah.